Hello, my name is Lewis, and by the way, I'm the Secretary of the Society this year. So in this session, I will be going through the very popular art of bokeh photography. Now, bokeh photography is defined by a nice, soft, blurred depth of field with a sharp subject in the foreground, such as a person, or if you're looking at an object, it could be a leaf, it could be anything that you have in focus. And in the background, you get a nice, as I said, blurred background, but what sets bokeh apart is having these pentagonal, hexagonal, nice shapes, nice dots of light. And they're not circles, as some people think. They are actually, as I said, they could be any kind of polygon shape, which makes them really interesting and cool. Now, when we do bokeh photography, we need to first of all talk about aperture. Now, aperture you may have heard of before, but I'll just go through it in case you don't know for any beginners. So aperture is the size of the hole in the lens of the camera. If you look down the camera, you can see a hole, and that is the size of the lens. So a larger aperture, for instance, would let in more light into the lens and hit the mirror at the back. And this, of course, importantly affects the depth of field, and that's how we get the bokeh effect, by playing with that depth of field. So, for instance, a shallow depth of field would give you would give the subject in the foreground a sharp appearance. They'd be very sharp, and the background would be very blurred, very blurred. And this is why it's commonly used for portrait photography. So you have someone in the foreground and they've got that beautiful blurred background, and that's a shallow depth of field. A deep depth of field, which is more likely used for landscapes, will give the whole image a nice sharp look. The foreground and the background will be in focus, and that's what we normally find on a phone camera, so everything's in focus. So just to go through the settings, because there's a few, it's just a few settings you need, but they aren't very difficult for any DSLR camera and even any phone. So on an iPhone you can have the portrait mode, where you play around with the f-stop number. It's that FS at the bottom. Play around with that, and what we want is a nice low FS number, and that would be the same on the camera as well. So on a camera we want the widest aperture, and to get that we want to use the aperture priority mode. So on a Canon that's an AV, and I think on most other cameras it's an A. And the shutter speed should be dealt with in itself. So if you're using aperture priority, you don't need to use the camera, you don't need to use the shutter speed. If you're doing it in manual mode, however, you will have to set the shutter speed as well. And that can be anything between, at night time, 1/90th of a second up to 1/25th of a second. So we've gone through the f-stop number. The ISO, now if we're doing this in the daytime, it needs to be a very low ISO. It needs to be the lowest, so about ISO 100. And if we're doing this in the evening, like now, we want it about 200 or 400. But just play around with it, because that's the thing. We need to play around with the settings. You need to find what's best for you, what's best for your camera, because every camera is different and every camera will respond differently to whatever lens or subject or light intensity you have behind you. So first off, we're going to tackle the subject of daytime bokeh. Now, you may think bokeh is exclusively a nighttime photographer's pursuit, but no, it's not. You can in fact take great pictures of bokeh in the daytime, like the one you see on the screen. Now, I took this last week. I went out on a nice sunny day and found just one tree on its own, and I thought, let's see what we can do with this. So I used the settings as I've just described. So we had a nice low FS number, a low ISO, and if you're on aperture priority, the shutter speed will sort itself. So you want to approach any object outside. So a tree is a great thing to use. So you want to make sure that when you go underneath the tree, that you're not getting any direct rays of sunlight into the camera. So, for instance, if you've got a cloud over the tree, that's great, but it's still nice bright light. You want to approach a branch of leaves, and if you zoom the camera right in, and you get part of the branch in the foreground, say in the corner or in the middle, wherever you like, and just play about to see with the focus how you can get the bokeh dots. So sometimes it depends, as I said, on what camera you have, what you're using, but if you play around with the focus, you'll eventually see these nice bokeh polygons coming up. And when you've got the nice picture, you take it, but I think the best thing to do is to just play around with the settings, because, you know, this is photography, it's an art, we need to get creative and we need to see what we can do. I found this the best way of getting bokeh in the daytime, but I'm sure there's other ways you can use it, but you just need to get the light, as I said, no direct sunlight, but make sure you've got a nice detailed object in the foreground, nice blurry background, and you should get this image pretty easy on any DSLR camera you're using. And I'll show some iPhone photography, iPhone examples in a minute. So next picture, I've come a bit further out. Oh yeah, and another thing, make sure you're not too close to the object in front of you, otherwise that will appear too blurry as well. It won't look right, basically. So keep a good distance so you've got the blurry background and the sharp foreground. And none of these pictures have been edited, by the way, so this is purely natural light, natural color. And this is the next picture. So we can see it's similar there, smaller dots, smaller polygons, but once again, a nice bokeh effect, just like fairy lights. And the next picture. So once again, yeah, and I think this one's a bit better. The composition is a little bit better here. We've got some nice leading lines of trees and a good color, a good sharpness in the foreground. So I do prefer that one. The next one. So this one's a bit darker, but we have some nice big bokeh dots in the background. I really like that one. The next one. So I haven't played around with the camera settings at all in this one, but it did give me this lovely shot in portrait. And we've got the bokeh dots just appearing between the tree branches. So like I say, play around with it and you can get some great pictures. Next one. So this one again, so we've just got the tiny bit of leaves at the bottom, tiny bit of leaves, but actually that's just a nice base of the picture, because when you look up, the rest of the picture is filled with this lovely like a dusting snow or sugar or everything, but something like that anyway. A lovely mix of bokeh lights there. And the next one, so this one actually is on my iPhone, so on the portrait mode, and I'm sure on other smartphones you can get similar modes and apps where you can toggle around with the FS number. But you can see that the portrait mode has managed to blur the background, and you can see it's not as good as on a DSLR camera, but you can see the bokeh dots in the background as well. And on the final picture, a little bit more blurry, but yes, again, you can see it, and it's got a nice swirl effect, I think, to that picture. But yeah, it's a bit less sharp, as I say, than the camera, but it's still getting that nice bokeh effect. So that's daytime bokeh covered. Now we're going to be moving on to nighttime bokeh. First of all, we're going to show you how we set up our studio, and then we will get straight on with some portraiture. Okay, so to set up our studio, I've got, first of all, backdrop, black cloth backdrop is best, and simply I've got some fairy lights. So we'll turn them on. Any kind of lights you've got will be great. So you just want to drape them quite freely over the top. Okay, so save that, and then use this clip here. So use any kind of clip you can just to get a nice pattern like that. In fact, we'll just move that a little bit more. Actually, we won't because we don't have enough time. Yeah, so I'll just tie that up like that. And another thing we can do that. So just play around with it, because honestly, once you're taking pictures, you won't see any of the wires, you won't see the cloth, you'll just see the lights. So that's what's important. That's nice.
I've got till Friday to figure it out. So do you want to suggest that now?
Yeah.
So you've got that all in shot.
See. Okay, that's great. So, where's the C? There we are. Okay.
You should all focus on a face, I think.
Oh, let me just. I turn the manual. Wait.
I can do my focus. Come on, this is being recorded. We can cut things.
Yeah, the subject's going to have to be nearer than that, because.
Play around with it. Do whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding the right sweeps. Just sorry. Yeah. Good. It's just the light you can see. So using the same settings as we had before, similar settings, just want the ISO to be a little bit, oh, there we are, a little bit brighter. And we want, and we want to zoom right in to the lights as far as it will go. Yeah. And then you want to play around with the focus, so you get that great effect there. Or if you want smaller, you can go there. And everything appears blurry now, but when you have a subject just in front of the lens here, you can see it will appear sharp. So that's how you need it. So when you're doing a portrait, the person needs to stand within a meter of the camera, and then your backdrop needs to be much further back than the camera, a few meters back. And you're all set up and ready to go. So if that's in focus, if you can come forward a bit more, please. So it's just about finding that right spot where you get that lovely bokeh in the background. Perfect. Okay, so you get some small bokeh circles there. Okay. And just play around with it. Okay, your subject may have to move a bit closer. Okay, so very similar, but we've got very nice light there and some nice bokeh dots in the background. Another one. Might be kind of... Okay, so like I said, just keep trying it, keep going, keep playing around with it. That's the best thing to do with photography in general. Find the way you want to do it, and you can find your unique way of getting bokeh, because it's a great thing to try with friends, great thing to try when you're on a walk, and I really hope you've enjoyed finding out all the different ways you can create it with PhotoSoc and yourself. Bye.